Hello. When I heard about the 70-mile-long column of Russian tanks and armoured vehicles and guns and things driving into Ukraine, and then when I heard that the ones at the front of the column had ground to a halt because they'd run out of fuel, I have to say that I was surprised. I mean, I was a lot more than surprised. I was completely gobsmacked. How could anyone make such an elementary mistake as to not provide enough fuel for your tanks? I know that Ukraine is a big place, but so do they, surely. I was put in mind of a study I read of how the British government managed the logistics of the Falklands War. It was in 1982. If you remember, there was no real internet, no mobile phones, and the theatre of war was 8,000 miles away. 8,000 miles, not just across the border. They had the whole of the Atlantic Ocean in the way. And it happened really quickly with no great notice. Certainly the British government and the military were caught with their pants down, and also caught with a very much depleted armed services. Because, of course, why would they want a huge navy and air force when the world was at peace? Nevertheless, within days, they'd come up with a plan. They commandeered many commercial ships, including the cruise ship, the QE2, and merchant ships as well, instructing them to return at once to Britain or Gibraltar to pick up fuel and troops. They turned Ascension Island into a military base. Ascension Island is in the mid-Atlantic and a lot closer to Africa than to the tip of South America. It wasn't that close, but it was close enough. They fitted transport aircraft with extra fuel tanks and with aerial refueling probes so they could resupply fighter aircraft in the air because there were no decent landing strips nearby, and they did this in days. Around the 19th of March, the Argentinian flag was raised on the uninhabited island of South Georgia, and by the 29th of March, merchant ships had been recalled to the UK for preparation, and submarines were already on their way to the area. The Argentinians invaded the inhabited Falkland Islands on the 2nd of April, and the aircraft carriers Hermes and Invincible were instructed to sail. One of the ships was in dry dock. I think it was Hermes was in dry dock with a lot of bits of it having been dismantled for maintenance, and Invincible was in better shape, but the crew were away on leave and they had to get both of them operational. Meanwhile, the British government was requisitioning merchant vessels, many of which were ill-equipped for long-haul travel. The cross-channel ferries, for instance, not the big flat-bottom things, but, the bigger boats. They didn't have tanks that carried enough fresh water for several weeks at sea, and they had to be refitted accordingly. There were all sorts of things like that, fitting up a lot of ships that did nothing more spectacular than plod from one nearby port to the other, and giving them the ability to sail for the South Atlantic, carrying hundreds of troops and supplies. There's a quote I got from Wikipedia about the fuel supplies. Fuel was a critical requirement of the task force, and for political reasons could not be obtained from South America, obviously, or South Africa. Countries in South America, even if sympathetic, felt unable to offer overt support in a conflict involving a neighbouring state, while South Africa was an international pariah at the time due to its system of apartheid. Collaboration with its regime risked alienating other countries at a time when Britain needed all the support it could muster for its international diplomatic efforts. The nearest source of supply was Freetown in Sierra Leone, 4,100 miles from the Falkland Islands. To carry the diesel fuel required by the gas turbines of the warships and the fuel oil required by Hermes and some of the older RFA and STUFT I don't know what that means. No doubt somebody will tell me. The 14 RFA tankers were supplemented by 15 requisitioned tankers. I'm paying particular attention to the fuel issue because that turned out to be critical, a big problem being experienced by the Russian troops right now in Ukraine. There was a whole lot of other stuff to do with medical supplies and communications and food and equipment, which involved cutting chunks of some ships to refit them for purpose. The point is, they didn't have chance to build up a presence on a border for 6 months. There was also some definite advantages to the fact that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan got on so well, and the US supplied some fuel to the UK on Ascension Island. It's British territory, but the US was leasing part of it, and they had fuel there. Also, the Americans supplied them with satellite intelligence. British forces landed on the Falklands on the 21st of May, and the Argentinians surrendered on the 14th of June. One of the biggest advantages the British had in a situation that was so replete with disadvantages was that the Argentinian army consisted of a lot of badly trained conscripts who didn't really know why they were fighting. Also, despite the proximity of the Argentinian army to the... Hey, stop it! Oi! I'll start again. Despite the proximity of the Argentinian army to the place they had invaded, I mean, the Falkland Islands were not that far away from Argentina at all, they weren't properly prepared. And since the government of the Argentine was full of cronyism, nepotism and corruption, so was their army. Obviously, that was going to happen. No doubt there were some good and brave soldiers amongst them. Certainly there were. But their bosses were mostly there because they had either paid for their position in some way or they were trustworthy lickspittles of the regime. And there you have it, you see. This is so far what seems to have happened with the Russian invasion. The Russians thought, just like the Argentinians did, that their target was going to be an ill-prepared walkover and there wasn't going to be much possibility of any backup for it. What they didn't realise was that no one likes their territory invaded, even if that territory is a fair lick away. Now, back to that column of Russian tanks and other heavy war vehicles. The ones at the front appear to have run out of fuel. This struck me as such an elementary mistake that it seems scarcely creditable. One reason for it was that the Ukrainians did a very clever thing. Apparently they sabotaged the lines of supply, the bridges and so on. So these tanks couldn't resupply themselves. They did something else which forced the Russians to, oh yeah, of course, the Ukrainians bombed the tankers that were bringing the fuel. That was clever. You don't have to waste your artillery on a tank. All you have to do is take the fuel suppliers out and then just wait for the tanks to run out of whatever they run on. And that was a good tactic, and it's a good reason for the Russian army to have run out of fuel. But it's not an excuse either. What could those generals be thinking of? Yeah, a few experts in the field of war have said that the probability is that the commanders didn't expect anywhere near the resistance they got. So they were unprepared to counter it. But also the theory is that thinking the Ukrainians would surrender pretty quickly, they went into the battle with minimal force and less destructive tactics because they didn't really want to wreck the place. And that's a reasonable idea as well. But they are soldiers, even if they'd been told the Ukrainians were going to act like they did in the 1930s. Even if they believed they wouldn't have a hard time bringing those misguided people back into the fold of Mother Russia, they should have been prepared. And they weren't. So why? At this point, I can only resort to my own theories. I wasn't there, and I'm not a polemologist, but my theory is that the top brass of the Russian army are not that good anymore, because Putin got rid of the sort of bright, intelligent and combative types who might have posed a threat to his power. That is a very common thing that happens with tyrants. They can't have rivals, and that means that they can't have good commanders. Unless they're related, of course. That often happens in some societies where you have your it's usually your brother or something like that to help you. But that only depends on how good the brother is, of course. Well, so that's it. I think that the reason that there's such a mess at the moment for the Russians is because Putin has got rid of all the imaginative ones, the ones who might have argued with him about various things. And yeah, that's the way it goes. I am Graniopteryx. I am on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. Whenever I make a video, I always let you know through Twitter, Gab or Parler as @Graniopteryx. So subscribe to one of those and you won't miss my videos. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel, click that like button and, well, share the video and support this channel if you can. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbow with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.